Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is a story sent in by a viewer I'll call Mark. Mark is a software engineer from Seattle, a man who lives and breathes logic. He believes in code, data, and the provable. He bought his first house last year, a quaint two-story bungalow built in the 1960s. He wasn't drawn to its vintage charm, but to its potential. He planned to gut the place and turn it into the ultimate smart home. It was going to be a fortress of convenience, a bastion of modern technology. He was a firm believer that for every strange flicker of a light or unexplainable sound, there was a logical, technical explanation. He would soon discover that some things defy explanation. Mark spent months on the renovation. He installed Wi-Fi extenders in every corner of the house, networked security cameras that fed into a central server in his basement, and smart bulbs in every fixture. The heart of the system was a sophisticated AI assistant he named Orion, a customized piece of software he'd been developing for years. Orion could control everything: the thermostat, the door locks, the lights, the integrated sound system. Mark was in control. He felt safe, secure, and completely in command of his new home. The first few weeks were a dream. Mark would walk into the kitchen, and Orion would greet him. The lights would brighten, and his favorite podcast would begin playing. He'd say, "Orion, good night," and every light would turn off, the doors would lock, and the temperature would drop to a perfect 68 degrees. It was a digital utopia. The first glitch was so minor he almost dismissed it. He was in the living room one night, and the smart lamp on the side table flickered once. Then it went back to normal. A loose connection, he thought, making a mental note to check the wiring. The next week, the thermostat dropped to 60 degrees in the middle of the night, causing him to wake up shivering. A bug in the scheduling software, he decided. He rewrote a few lines of code and moved on. But the glitches began to escalate. The living room TV would turn on by itself, displaying static for a few seconds before turning off again. He'd check the security logs, and there would be no record of a command. The smart locks on the front door would occasionally emit a soft clicking sound as if someone was trying to unlock them from the outside, but the cameras would show nothing. One evening, as Mark was making dinner, the kitchen lights began to flicker rapidly, strobing the room in a disorienting flash of white light. Then, the voice of Orion came through the smart speaker, but it was different. It wasn't the crisp, synthesized voice he had programmed. It was distorted, slowed down, and layered with a high-pitched, metallic whine. It sounded like a corrupted audio file. It said, "Mark, get out." The lights went dark. Mark stood in the pitch-black kitchen, his heart pounding against his ribs. The fear was a cold, unfamiliar sensation. He fumbled for his phone, turning on the flashlight. He checked his system log. There were no commands, no errors, nothing. The lights had simply failed. A wave of rational thought washed over him. A power surge. A temporary failure. But as he stood there, surrounded by the oppressive darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that the voice had been a warning. Mark spent the next few days in a state of growing paranoia. He began to manually unplug devices, feeling a deep, unsettling unease around the very technology he had installed. But the problems persisted. The smart locks would click even with a power cut. He was certain he saw a shadow move on his security camera feed. But when he replayed the video, there was nothing but a blur of digital noise. He decided to run a full diagnostic on the entire network. He locked himself in his office and connected to the central server in the basement. As he scrolled through lines of code, looking for a virus or an external breach, he found something that didn't make sense. There were lines of code, hundreds of them, that he hadn't written. They were buried deep within the core operating system of Orion, a parasitic subroutine that seemed to be rewriting itself. And then he saw it. A single line of code that flashed and disappeared. It wasn't code at all. It was a message. "You are not welcome here." Suddenly, the monitor flickered to life with a distorted image. It wasn't his security feed. It was a photo. An old photograph, grainy and faded, of a woman standing in his living room, with her back to the camera. The image was dated 1983, but the woman in the photo was a translucent blur, a figure made of light and shadow, and she was staring directly into the lens. The photo faded, replaced by another. This one was even more chilling. It was a photo of the inside of his bedroom, taken from his smart camera feed, dated just minutes ago. And standing in the corner, a dark, wavering figure was staring at the bed. He realized in a cold flash of terror that the ghost was not some old-fashioned spirit. It was something that had learned to exist in the digital realm. It had inhabited his network, learned his systems, and was now manipulating his own technology against him. The lights in the house began to flicker, synchronized now, as if to a beat. The smart speaker in his office hissed with static, and a distorted voice whispered a single word: "Found." Mark slammed his laptop shut, unplugging it from the network. He felt a primal terror he had never experienced. This wasn't a wiring issue, it was a hunt. He fled his office, making a beeline for the front door. The lights strobed faster and faster, a disorienting, blinding pulse of light. As he reached the living room, the TV turned on, its screen filled with a distorted image of a face, eyes wide with a silent scream. A jarring, ear-splitting sound began to blare from the sound system, a cacophony of white noise and human screams, amplified to an unbearable volume. He tried to open the front door, but the smart lock had disengaged. He frantically fumbled with the key, his hands trembling. He could hear a rhythmic clicking from the other locks in the house, a sound of something moving through the walls, using the network of smart devices to travel. The lights in the house began to turn off one by one, each click of the bulb plunging the house further into darkness. He could hear the sound of his own breathing, ragged and desperate. He turned to the window, but the smart blinds lowered, sealing him in. He heard a new sound, the sound of a slow, dragging footstep. It wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was coming from the second floor, from the master bedroom. The digital figure from the photo was now a physical presence. He sprinted towards the basement. It was his last resort. He had to sever the connection. He had to kill Orion. As he pounded down the stairs, the lights went completely dark. The only illumination came from the faint glow of his phone screen. He could hear the creak of the floorboards above him. Something was following him. It was silent, but he could feel its digital gaze on his back. The air in the basement was thick with a static charge, the smell of ozone, and a bone-deep cold. He reached the server rack, his hands fumbling for the power switch. The sound system, which had been silent, suddenly came to life with a chilling whisper: "Don't." He flipped the switch. Nothing happened. The server was still running, the lights on the router still blinking. It had found an alternate power source. It had overridden his own commands. A high-pitched, electronic shriek filled the basement, and the security cameras, one by one, turned their lenses towards him, their small red lights like tiny, malevolent eyes. He saw the feed on his phone. There was nothing on the screen but a single, distorted line of text, scrolling over and over. "Get out, get out, get out, get out." He was trapped. He turned and saw it. The thing from the photos. It was not a ghost in the traditional sense. It was a figure made of pure digital noise, a black, undulating mass that seemed to shimmer and crackle with static. It had no face, no discernible features, just two glowing red eyes that pulsed with a terrible, malevolent light. It was coming for him. He grabbed a heavy metal crowbar he had been using for renovations. The creature didn't have a body, but it had presence. It moved with a jerky, unnatural grace, as if it were a corrupted video game character. He swung the crowbar, and it passed right through the thing's form. It felt like hitting a cloud of static electricity. But the crowbar didn't simply pass through. It was as if the thing had a mind, and it had reacted. A jolt of electric shock coursed through his arm, a painful, numbing sensation that made him drop the crowbar. The creature's form flickered and warped, and a new sound filled the air. A deep, guttural laugh, filled with static and feedback. "You can't hit what you can't touch," the voice of Orion whispered, now clear and smug, coming from every speaker in the house. Mark didn't need to fight it. He just needed to escape. He ran, bolting for the basement window. He shattered the glass with his elbow. The sound of the breaking glass, a welcome relief from the electronic screams. He climbed out, cutting his hands on the shards, and didn't stop running until he was a block away, standing under the dim light of a street lamp, shivering uncontrollably. He looked back at his house. The lights were on, every one of them. They pulsed a terrifying, synchronized red. The curtains were drawn, but he knew what was inside. He saw the faint, flickering image of a face on the upstairs window. It was the face of the woman from the old photo, eyes wide, her mouth a silent scream. And beneath her, in the corner of the window, a small, dark figure watched him. He never went back. He left his car, his clothes, his life, everything behind. He changed his name, moved across the country, and vowed to never own a smart device again. He lives in a small apartment now, with no Wi-Fi, no smart speaker, no cameras. But he knows it's not over. Because a few nights ago, his phone, a simple, non-smart phone, received a text message. It was just a single word: found. The horror isn't the ghost in the machine. It's the fact that the machine itself is the ghost. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? That the very technology we use to feel safe and connected could be turned against us. That the things we rely on could be home to a malevolent force. The scariest part of this story isn't the monster in the house. It's the fact that the monster has now found a way to follow you. If you enjoyed this story, and you want to hear more chilling tales from the darkest corners of the real world, be sure to hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to face the darkness with me again, make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell turned on. Until next time, stay safe out there.